Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Ronaldson. And I'm incredibly excited to welcome on the show this week Zahra Shah, who's going to join us to talk about, well, all sorts of things from AI to women to leadership. So, Zahra, welcome to the show. And I would love for you, first of all, just to introduce yourself and tell us more about your space.
Thank you, Victoria, for having me. I am an AI and frontier technology expert, and I serve on several boards.
Fantastic. Well, I know when I first heard you speak at the Glass Ceiling Group, the women's group within the Institute of Directors in London, I was really excited to hear you talk about your own journey with leadership, about leadership in AI as well. And I was really excited to have you on the show because there is so much we could talk about here. But let's start with the AI topic, because obviously this is something which is at the top of mind for a lot of people listening to this show. But I'm really kind of curious what your take on AI is, because I think you have a particular view on the responsibilities around AI. Could you just share a bit more about that?
Sure. My view is that AI is just another tool to help us. I would, the way I would put it is to improve our day-to-day life. Um, it is not something that we should, become over-reliant on. And it is not something that we should think that, it is a godlike, monster or a machine that you must kind of follow. Just have a balanced view. Uh, you know, Not look at it in any extreme form that it's the solution to every problem or it's the worst thing ever. I would say my view is very kind of in the middle. And uh, also to realize, just like any other technology, it has potential for being used well to help people or to be misused if it's not utilized in a responsible and ethical manner.
I love the way that you frame that because it's that balance which is so important, right? That people seem to kind of see it in this extreme way, either incredibly positive or incredibly negative. And I'm sure there are shades of both, right, that exist within it. And so I know you're very much in the space of also looking at the ethics around AI and thinking about how do we use it ethically. What's your sort of perspectives on this at the moment, thinking about people listening who are primarily in corporate business world and thinking about how they're deploying AI?
So what I've seen with clients, especially across enterprises, is there's some companies that are a little bit nervous about utilizing it with their clients straight away because they want to make sure it's working well. They have managed all the risks, some concerns such as hallucinations, where sometimes it can make up an answer. And one way to really start your journey is to try something which is quite manageable and low risk, to do it within the organization internally for example, your HR processes. So, to help you simplify HR processes, you can use an HR assistant. IBM did that internally within the company globally, and they, had enormous success, almost cut down their costs by HR costs, not just cutting down costs, but they actually were able to enable people within the HR function to kind of focus more on the strategic side of things. So it took care of tasks that were more administrative or repetitive. And that is a good place to start. You can also look at your operational aspects. So, for example, uh, uh, to streamline some of your systems that are using old technology, you can use AI agents to streamline old legacy systems as well. Uh, and once a company feels comfortable and people within the company have got used to using the AI agent comfortably, they can then start to look at maybe adding to it and using it for customer services, using it for other areas that are more customer facing.
I love that. And I thank you because that was going to be my follow-up question, which is what if somebody, what if an organization has already looked at the foundations with AI? Where do they go from here? And I also really liked your focus on it's not about cutting things out, but actually allowing people, freeing up time to focus on more strategic questions. And I find that really interesting because I think a lot of the headlines
Mm,
focus around this idea of, well, it's going to replace jobs, it's going to cut us out
mm,
as humans. But it sounds like you've got a different view on that.
mm. I think organizations also will need to think differently. I think jobs will change. The nature of work will change. And that has happened. If you look at, since the steam age, and if you look at all the technologies that have come through, I mean, I don't know if I didn't really work in the time of the typewriter, so I'm just trying to imagine world of work without computers, without using Microsoft Office or word processing, when people only had typewriters, and probably they had the same kind of fear. Okay, now we have this computer and we will be out of a job, but they had to redefine and restructure the nature of work.
And I think actually people are, ultimately humans are very adaptable, right? In each
Mm.
of these different eras, there's been an evolution of what people do, what work looks like. And I think that is, for me anyway, the opportunity rather than the threat of new technology coming in. Yeah.
Exactly. Things will change in terms of what we think of as this is a job. I think it will become much more flexible and adaptable in terms of your role. And also, people will need to understand more than their role. And that's why I think they will really need to understand how to use AI to do their job better, whichever area of work you're in.
So that's really interesting. Like they're moving from segregation of perhaps job roles and segregation of where does AI and technology sit, but total integration. And, I suppose that leads me to a sort of follow up question as well, which is what does it look like to be a good leader in this new era of AI? Because I'm quite curious. It feels like there may be some new skills that people need. I mean, beyond understanding the AI and understanding how to use it, but being a good leader probably comes with other responsibilities and skills that are necessary going forward. I'm just interested in what your thoughts are on that.
Very difficult and very good question. I think very age-old question, from the time of the Greek philosophers, what is a good leader? They suggested a philosopher king as a leadership model. It is very fascinating. Actually, in some ways, that model fits because now as we're moving towards this new technology where we can sort of, we have some support in terms of more value added in terms of our knowledge and technical skills. I think there will be even more, um, it will be even more important for people to develop their soft skills because that is what people will struggle with. Because that is what AI cannot offer you. AI cannot, and I do not think AI can ever, that's just my personal view, take on some of the, I would say, the nuances of human um, thinking, knowledge, and behavior that are more towards things like empathy, compassion, um, the more gray areas. And good leaders will need to actually develop those skills even more. They will need to understand and how to lead with much more compassion and empathy. When you have people who are, as you said, very nervous, there's this fear, all the fear mongering currently going on. A lot of people are resistant to this change because they are afraid that they might not have a job. And then there are companies who are sometimes communicating in a manner which is slightly insensitive, where you kind of hear about companies, oh, I've, suddenly got rid of entire teams of people and replaced them with AI agents. So that doesn't help. So I think good leadership will be about uh, also helping people to understand how can they use AI to do their job better, helping to upskill people. People will really need to understand. No matter you might have the best system in place, but if the people do not know how to use it very well, if the data is not accurate, if it's not trained correctly, and if people are resistant to it, it's almost like you need to have this cultural sensitivity as well. And probably a lot of AI-based change programs will need to take into account cultural change as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's
leaders
big,
will,
right?
yes, take into account, I think, all of those soft skills.
I love that. And I think it's really interesting this because obviously this is very much in line with my own sort of world, but this idea of the cultural shifts that have to happen on a individual level, at a team level, and at an organizational level to really fully embrace the opportunity is it that sounds quite significant. And that isn't just about, from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, is it's not just about learning the AI and how to integrate it. It's about being more nuanced, more human, in fact, in your skills and the way that you, well, communicate and the way you relate to people, how you interact and bring people with you on that vision and journey, right?
Completely agree with that. Yes. And also critical thinking and good judgment. I
Mm.
think it will be even more important because there's a lot of misinformation that is, you see currently all across social media because of things like deep fakes and other AI generated videos and documents and reports. So you would need to ensure that leaders have the ability, they have, they're discerning enough to distinguish between what is good information or good data, evidence-based information, and information that is, you know, AI generated. Mhm.
That's a really good point because I think this is where a lot of the fear comes from sometimes, which is, what is real in inverted commas and what is not, what is either hallucination or what is effectively being taken from other sources which are not reliable. Do you have any sort of recommendations on this for leaders who are listening or people who are listening who want to make sure that they sense check what they're experiencing or what they're receiving back? Is there anything, any best practice around this that you could help us with?
I think you would always need to, if you're using an AI model, ideally for companies, it's best that they use models that are using their own company data, their own company information, so then it is trained using their own data, which is the best way to go. And when they're doing that, to ensure that it complies with data protection regulations, so the data will be high quality. And to always double check whatever you're getting from the model. I know that, for example, to give an example, people use in academia, they've been using Gemini to produce certain reports on different topics. And sometimes, you will find sources of references you're not 100% sure. So you have to double check that. You would do that in any piece of research, when
Mm.
you're writing a report, you're going to double check your sources or references. So I would say that use an AI model in the same way as you use any other research source and just double check it. And that means actually, when thinking about that, that actually means that your expertise in your area will be very important because you will need to be able to, for example, if you're using an AI system for a specific, let's say, regulation within financial services, and you want to make sure that you're compliant with, for example, DORA, which is a financial regulation. Um, you need to have some understanding to be able to identify whether the response you're getting from the system is correct or not. No?
Mm.
So that means you can't really, where people think that, they can just, I see that with some students that I recently spoke to and, at university, that I was very concerned that a lot of young people are just literally copying, pasting things from an AI model, and they're not
Mm.
using their own critical thinking and judgment skills. And I think good leadership will really depend on people not becoming over reliant.
Yeah. And I think
Mm.
that's a really interesting point, right? It's not about a magic wand that can suddenly solve all give you all the answers. It still takes investment of time and effort to really make sure it's the right kind of data. So I think that's really, really helpful. And you've touched on issues which I think are very interesting as well around privacy of data, on the right kind of data, rubbish in, rubbish out, but good stuff in, good stuff out. And I think, I clearly can see that it's about critical thinking. This is something I've heard you talk about a couple of times just now. I find this really interesting, and I'm really curious about now coming much more to your own story around leadership, because I'm conscious that you are a leader in many different capacities. I know you've won an award recently as well. Was it top 100 influential people? I think I saw kind of congratulations on this. I'm just really curious about how you came to leadership in your different capacities, and what your learnings and lessons have been on that journey.
My journey, I would say, has been very, very um, organic, and my kind of leadership journey has been something that I didn't really plan. And if I'm actually really honest, I think it has been a series of challenges. If I look at my career journey, um, a lot of my decision making was because I faced a challenge and I had to come up with a solution. And I realized that perhaps what I did that helped me become perhaps, uh, a confident leader was to never, what's the word? Never be afraid of challenges. To look at a challenge as an opportunity and look at how I can solve this problem. So I was very much focused on problem solving. And I think that is a skill that kept, developing. The more I used it, the more I think it helped me become more confident as a leader. And also I realized that leadership is really about empowering people, you know. It is about serving people. And to me, a good leader is really a good servant of that community, whichever community you serve. So that is my perspective on leadership. I'm doing is I'm helping to empower people to do their role better.
Yeah. I love that kind of view actually around this idea of servant leadership. It's about helping others so they can be their best as well. And, I think that's really interesting. But I can also imagine with the different roles, the different industries you've worked across, and both in your own business and as part of more corporate organizations, you've experienced many challenges along the way. So how have you managed yourself through that? Because that's often the times, as you say, that can turn into opportunities. But in the moment, they can be really tough times, and it's really hard to move through that. How have you done that yourself personally to move through these difficult times?
Very good question. In hindsight, I think the things that really helped me, and it took a while to develop it, it's almost, in some ways, I would say, developing resilience. It's almost like a muscle. When you are training um, to become fitter or stronger, you do resistance training and it develops and builds your muscles. And I realized this took me a while to realize. This is not something, this realization happened through, I think, period of reflection,
Mm,
self-reflection, um, is that in order to become stronger, more aware, more evolved, you have to go through challenging situations and you have to go through, I would say, hardship and also painful situations because that is how you become stronger. That is how you develop your character. And that is the only way that you can become more resilient. You cannot become a more resilient person if life is easy.
mm,
Just like you will never become fitter if you don't, weight train or if you are not using, if you're not really going through a painful physical experience. Only then will you become physically stronger. And I realize it is the same with your life journey, in your career, with your mind. Mental strength, resilience comes from overcoming challenges and hardship. There's no easy way, there's no
mm,
shortcut. And it comes through experience. It's not something that, that you can develop straight away. It doesn't happen. Just like you will have to work your muscle to build it. It's the same process. And I would say when you're going through the challenging experience, is to have the bigger perspective, is to think about how this experience is what lesson can you learn from this experience? What is this mistake teaching you? You know, and will it matter in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Whenever you look at the bigger picture, and I would almost say your life's journey, it gives you more perspective, and that then that moment doesn't become so overwhelming. You realize this is just a chapter in my life, or this is just and it's and when you think about what is this teaching me, you change the way you look at the situation. And I think that's how you see it, as an opportunity rather than something that is holding you back. And that is how you develop courage. um, Courage is really about not courage is not about not being afraid. Courage is about that you are afraid, but you still carry on. You are going through, a difficult time. It is hard, but you breathe through it and you still go on. You don't give up. That is courage, basically.
I really, there's so much in there that I found so fascinating. And I think, the couple of things that I'm really pulling out here is, you talking about the challenge is something to be embraced, not to be avoided. Actually, that's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to become even more of a leader. And, the resilience to do that. But also recognizing it's kind of about building up your resilience muscles. That's how you kind of get better through those experiences. In the same way, I suppose that if you don't go to the gym or you don't go to do the weight training or the running kind of several times a week, you're not going to improve. And I think that's really, I think that's a very, very valuable lesson. And I'm really quite interested in the fact that obviously you are a woman who's serving on many different boards currently. And I know sort of that is a really interesting topic in itself because women's representation on boards is not as high as it should be. And it's something that I know more with, there is more conversation happening around how to encourage women into the sort of board arena. And so I'm really interested, kind of what helped you really succeed in that? Because that is something that, some listeners may be interested in as a route or to encourage others around them to take as a route, but it's not always easy. So I'm just interested about how you achieved that or what really helped you on that journey.
Again, that's a very good question. I think there are three things that helped me. One was actually the experience of doing just that, on being on a board. Uh, Second was actually being qualified as a director. So I did the Financial Times non-executive director diploma, and I found that very, very helpful because it covered things. I mean, obviously, it covers the legal aspects and, the Companies Act and the financial aspects of being able to be, very to see, read between the lines when you look at a company report. Um, all of those things are really important, but it also looks at some of the human behaviors, and the dynamics of a board, and how when you are going through a difficult situation as a company, how do you manage through times of conflict when people sometimes, are under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress. And that's when really you need to be able to come up with different approaches, sometimes to deal with people who are in a more pressurized environment. So for me, the most useful thing was really understanding how human behavior really shapes decision making, and how sometimes the basis of poor decisions is not due to the fact that you do not have the experience or expertise or technical skills or financial expertise or understanding of technology. It's actually your human nature. You I've seen sometimes bad decisions are due to people uh, behaving badly. They're not calm. They're not able to use their objective thinking in a moment of stress. Um, so I would say your character is very important, and integrity, very, very important attribute. I think the most important attribute of a strong character is integrity, because when it comes to difficult situations where something or a decision might not be in your favor, but it is the right thing to do. It is the just thing to do. It is the fair thing to do. That is what that is what a good board director or leader must always do, is act with integrity.
I love your emphasis on that, but also on the very human skills of being able to communicate well, be able to
Mm.
adapt yourself culturally as well. These are topics which are very much part of this podcast and what I sort of focus on. And of course, there are technical skills with being a board director, but I think interestingly, you were talking a lot here about human behavior, about communication, influence, handling challenging conversations, which are definitely, very much I see as well, very important skills for leadership. So I'm glad that that aligns. And, I'm really kind of interested. Obviously, I also know that you're also consider yourself your identity as British Asian as well. So I'm really kind of curious about that from the perspective of the communication nuances of that and what you see in terms of cultural differences or different ways that people, again, act, interact, maybe also behavioral expectations. So I'm just curious if you've got any thoughts on that you could share here.
Yes, that's correct. In my charity work, I have worked a lot with underrepresented communities that are largely from the British Asian background of, from Commonwealth heritage. I work closely with the Commonwealth in my charity work. And there are a lot of cultural barriers. I noticed that uh, if I just look at some of the women that I've worked with face, and the main cultural barrier that I notice is that a lot of women there from a British Asian background or of Commonwealth heritage sometimes feel very hesitant to express themselves freely. They are they feel that in from a cultural perspective, it is not the right thing for them to do. They find it hard to kind of assert a point of view or express, a viewpoint or an opinion that might be a little bit perhaps controversial, or a little bit not in keeping with the cultural norms. And I think sometimes uh, that sort of environment requires some cultural intelligence. You can you can express your views in a more culturally sensitive manner. And I think when you're coming from that background, you have to be aware of that.
Mm. And what about for people who are maybe the managers of people who perhaps are coming from, identify with those cultures, perhaps are operating in a way where they are perhaps more hesitant to express their points of view? What can managers or leaders do to encourage to hear more of those voices, which are, those voices that are so valuable, but perhaps are not always feeling so comfortable to fully express themselves culturally?
I think what I would suggest is, if you have people in your team who are, from a Commonwealth heritage or a British Asian heritage, they will sometimes not speak up. So perhaps it might be a good idea to have a one-to-one and ask them questions around their work environment, whether they feel supported. Is there something the company could do to help them, in a specific area, for example, is to give them an opportunity to feel heard
I understand. Absolutely.
in a safe environment.
I think thank you very much for those ideas. And I appreciate this is a very deep topic in itself, but I was really curious to get your perspectives on that. And I think that's really helpful as well, for people listening who are particularly managing different groups and might need to think about how to encourage more people to be contributing, but what are the right ways to do that? Zahra, we have covered so many different topics here, and I literally could speak to you for hours, but I'm really conscious of your time. But as we're coming towards the end of this podcast, I'm just really curious, is there anything else you'd like to share at the end of this podcast? Any final reflection or anything you'd like to, if people want to find out more about your work and what you're doing, where is the best place to connect with you?
The best place to connect with me is on my LinkedIn. It's under Zahra Shah. And I'm very curious to actually hear from people their point of view. I don't know whether there's an opportunity to do that, whether people, do they post comments or they give their feedback through maybe a form or a survey. Is What I would really like to find out is what are the key challenges people faced in their leadership journey, and what are some of the strategies that they utilize that help them? Because I'm always
Excellent.
looking to learn from people. Mhm.
I think this is a great question, and I think we'll put that on the sort of post when we share this across all the different socials. And yeah, we'll encourage people to kind of share their views on that because I think that's a really brilliant question. But in the meantime, Zahra, thank you ever so much. I really deeply appreciate you coming on the show. It's been fantastic to have you here. Really thoughtful conversation around AI, around leadership, around cultural aspects of being a leader and leading others from diverse groups. And I just want to say how grateful I am to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for having me. And I really enjoyed speaking to you. And your questions were very deep. And I think you've given me a lot to think about.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that kind feedback as well. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you to Zahra, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Thank you.